David Joyce, who's our CEO and Vice Chairman of GE. Bill Fitzgerald, who you guys know, runs commercial business. And Tony Mathis, who runs the military. Probably the easiest way to describe these guys is they've all been prominent leadership roles of aviation for at least 10 years. And during their reign in this leadership role, this place has doubled in size organically. So Gene and Bill are in charge of the largest fleet of commercial engines in aviation history, no pressure there. And Tony's in charge of the largest portfolio of brand new military engines we've done in decades, so no pressure there either. And of course they all work with David, who's oversees this whole thing. So that's how I want to introduce, where's Perry? Perry is the new manager of media relations. So if you haven't met Perry, make sure you take the time to meet him afterwards. So we'll entrust the future events with him, and so make sure you take time to talk to Perry. At this point, I'll shut up and let David get rolling.
Do I need? Can you hear me? Yes. I don't need that.
We can hear you fine.
So before I get started, just a thanks to the one and only Rick Kennedy. I mean, how many years, Rick? 20?
30.
30. 30? It's been that long. I can't remember. 30 years. I never get bored when Rick invites me to these things because he's always got something up his sleeve. Not only that, he's great to share music with because he's got more music trivia than anybody you'll ever meet. So, in addition
He
to
also looks about 30, which is really abnormal.
Isn't it annoying? He's lived a blessed life. Now 62. So, look, we have almost the entire leadership of aviation here at the show. So in addition to these three, if you have any other questions, we can line you up with someone to talk with if there's some specifics. In addition to that, for the second year in a row, we've got an additional chalet dedicated to additive. And this year we have the new CEO of the additive business, Jason Oliver's over there. So if you get a chance, go over, meet Jason. You'll see exactly why we're so excited about this future of additive, not just within aviation, but quite frankly across all the industrials. So take the time to go over. So with that, I'll kind of start with some opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over for questions if you guys are okay with that. Okay? You can hear me okay, but yeah? All right. If not, just give me something. So I just mentioned on CNBC, I think conservatively we'll announce about maybe a little over $15 billion of new business in this show, and that'll be orders plus commitments. So, you know, some of the commitments will be handshakes and signatures that need to turn into POs. But we're thinking about 15. It won't be below 15, and it may be above it depending on whether some of the deals come home or not. But that's a good round number to start Monday morning with as we take a look at it. Relative to the business, I'm very, very happy with the position of aviation and the strength of the market as well. We have our largest industrial backlog at GE Aviation in the history of the company. It's now out at $200 billion. That includes service agreements as well as equipment. We've never capped the 2 number on backlog before, so this is a first for us. And our total engine deliveries in 2018 are forecasted to be over 4,000 units. And that includes CFM. That includes all segments, so that's military, commercial, business and general aviation, as well as the CFM product line. So I'll start with the commercial segment since it's our largest, which remains incredibly strong. You all see the IATA figures like I do. Their forecast for 2018 is a 7% growth in demand for air travel. This is coming off of a 2017 where the figures, corrected figures went up to 8.1% growth in 2017. So think about that. It's 15% growth in demand for air travel worldwide in 2 years. Give you an idea of what kind of a cycle we're in. And that demand is very broad globally. So you have the largest market for demand for air travel in the world is Asia Pacific, including China. It's grown at 9.5%. You have the second largest market in the world, the United States, which has grown at 4%. Third largest market is Europe. It's grown at 7%. So the demand for air travel has got a very broad base of support around the world, and it continues to be strong in the commercial world. We expect that we'll add about 2.2 million departures as an industry in 2018 forecasted. That's another 6% growth. And we'll increase the number of passengers we fly by 6.5% in 2018 forecasted. This is IATA. So those are really strong numbers for the industry. We've been in a good cycle, and it looks like that cycle is going to continue into 18 and beyond. And that's great news for us because between GE and CFM, and the strength of our total global position, selling into that market and servicing into that market is a real advantage for us. To give you some perspective, we have 36,000 engines that are commercial engines that are in service in 2017. That number grows to 47,000 forecasted by 2025. So to give you some idea of where we think the market's going and where we think our growth is in air travel. Our commercial backlog, commercial, not total industrial, is $160 billion, the commercial backlog for GE Aviation. And as you've heard me say many times, 2 out of every 3 departures in the world are powered by GE or CFM engines. So in fact, it's 69.5% to be exact. 2/3 is close enough, for us. So we feel really good about our positioning. And not only our positioning for today, but for the future, because as you know, we've been on a journey to transform our commercial engine portfolio for probably the last 10 years, starting with the GE9X, which replaced our CF6 product line, the LEAP, which replaced the CFM product line, and coming up, the GE9X, which is replacing the GE90. So you're talking from the biggest wide bodies all the way down to our narrow bodies. We've essentially completely replaced our commercial portfolio. And I'm very proud of how well we've done that. One of the statistics I like to quote is the one from Air Finance Journal, which has ranked our GE9X engine as the #1 wide body engine for investor appeal, for remarketability, and for residual value. In addition, the same group of investors has ranked our LEAP engine as the #1 engine in narrow body for exactly the same 3 reasons: for investor appeal, remarketability, and residual value, which is a real testament to the technology and success of this transformation of the portfolio that we've made in the commercial world. And it bodes well for a future that's bright for this business. To give you some perspective, we delivered on LEAP. We delivered our 33,000th CFM engine this year. 33 total CFMs. At the same time, this is our 10th anniversary from announcing the initiation of the LEAP program this year. And now LEAP is powering 350 aircraft in service at 61 customers, and we've just gone north of 1.5 million hours in it for the next generation. So the transformation is going very well as we move into another full generation of success for CFM. We're very happy with it. And right now, 2018 mid-year, we've taken more orders for LEAP mid-year 2018 than we did all of 17. To give you an idea how fast the order book's growing. Okay, so its success is manifests itself in the demand in the marketplace. Our production of LEAP, for the first time, will be greater than our production of CFM this year. So you remember, CFM comes down, LEAP goes up. This is the crossing year. In July, we actually will cross to where we will get to the point to where for the year we're going to ship more LEAPs than we will CFMs by the end of the year. And we'll never look back. LEAP's going to continue to move up. We'll ship over 1,100 this year. That number goes to north of 1,900 next year, and that number's 2,300 in 2020.
Yes.
Yep. So it continues to be a very successful program.
How many in 2020?
2,300. So almost 2019, 2,300, over 1,100 this year. Certainly we've had our share of teething pains with the rate. Bill will address that with your questions. We'll be back on plan by year end. Both Airbus and Boeing are satisfied with our recovery plan, and we're supporting both of them. Give you some perspective on the production rate of CFM in general, and LEAP particularly. CFM between 2015 and 2020 will, when it's all said and done at the end of this decade, you'll look back the last 5 years and it will have increased its output by 50%. So we'll be 1.5 times the production we were in 2015 by the time we get to 2020 on CFM, to give you some idea of the success of that narrow body. And the engine's working great in the field. Transition a little bit to a couple other highlights. GE9X, we took flight for the first time on the engine in 2008, 17?
Yeah,
It was
in March.
March of 18.
Of 18.
Thank you, Bill. I can't keep it straight. Very happy with the flight test campaign, very happy with the development of the engine. So that program is going well. GENX, great success story. 65% win rate on the 787s. We have close to 2,000 engines total now on order. And to give you a perspective, we just completed the longest commercially scheduled flight in the world on a 787 powered by GNX from Australia to London with Qantas. There's no other engine in the world that could have done that flight. There's no other engine's got the fuel efficiency that the GNX does to be able to do that long of a mission. It was 9,000 miles.
9,000 miles flight.
Yep, and we're very proud of that. And only a GENX could have made that flight come to reality. On the services side, as I said, our total commercial backlog, I told you, was 160 billion. I think 130 of that is in the services portfolio. We have, like I said, 36,000 engines in the field right now commercially, all being monitored real time using our diagnostics programs, which gives us great insights into how to maintain and service these things. Shop visits, which is the key to the spares business, will be over 5,100 in 18 is the forecast, I believe, Gene, somewhere around there?
5,500.
5,500, okay. And that exceeds, will be north of 62 to 6,500 as you look in the out years in 2023. So very positive growth in shop visits in addition to our growth in the installed base. Switching to military so that I can get Tony in here. Certainly the global environment that we all are dealing with is driving a modernization internationally. You couple that with the new U.S. defense strategy that rebuilds readiness, strengthens alliances like NATO, and does some reform on department business practices. And we believe that in general, military as defense is going to be a growth industry for us. I'll be honest with you, this sector is about $4 billion of sales for us right now. I see it doubling by 2025, which is about a 9% compounded annual growth rate. And I think that may be conservative when you really take a look at all the work that's going on in the defense industry right now. Any way we look at it, the president's budget is up $74 billion from 17 to 19, and that's in all the accounts, personnel, procurement, operations maintenance, as well as R&D. If you take Strategic Defense Intelligence, which is an agency that actually tries to predict demand growth in the military, it's predicting a forecast of a 4.7% growth in fixed-wing military over the next 10 years, 4.3% in rotary, 3% in naval surface combatants, so all very positive growth trends. And I like the way we're positioned in the military. So along with that, we're ramping up talent. As I said last year, we've already transferred 750 engineers that were responsible, quite frankly, for this big transition in our commercial portfolio. They're now moved over to our military portfolio. By the end of 2020, we'll have a total of 1,100 transferred. This is very high talent that we have in the business technically that can go ahead and take advantage of these great opportunities. And there's just a whole bunch of programs, which I'm sure you have questions for Tony about, whether it be the ITEP program, the T901. We feel really good about where we are on that program. We spent $130 million of our own money to ensure that we can hit some very demanding requirements from the Army and do it with an incredibly reliable product that understands how important sustainability is. All you have to do is watch a helicopter land in Iraq once to know how important sustainability and maintenance is going to be to that program. So we've done a lot of great design work to make sure that our experience on the existing T700 is actually used to design the next generation and make it even more reliable. The adaptive cycle technology is in full swing. You know, we have a $1.1 billion demonstrator program we're working on to size and demonstrate an engine the size of an F-35. In fact, it'll be ground tested in an F-35. We have another program that's $437 million for technical maturation acceleration on the same technology that we're involved with. And then there's others. There's the B-52 re-engining program. We feel really well positioned with 2 engines that we're going to offer for that. The CF-34-10, which flies in the Embraer 190, 7,000 departures every day. Just an incredibly reliable engine, and it's the perfect thrust size for that B-52. Or if they want the most advanced technology, business and general aviation engine that's certified, they can take the Passport engine for the Global 7500. It's better in fuel burn. Its time on wing will be about 14,000 hours, so it's another good choice depending on what they want to do, but we have two good candidates for that program. The heavy lift on the King Stallion CH-53K, the T408, we went in, delivered the first engine in May. That program's doing great. The trainer, both Lockheed and Boeing have chosen the F404 to power their trainers. We think that's a smart, very cost-effective modernization that ensures the Air Force very stable and very mature sustainability costs at a time when they're interested in making sure they understand their sustainability. And we're actually working on a 414 enhanced engine study right now, which is very attractive in terms of what we can do. So we've got a little program that we're looking at with that. And then I could go on. We have programs in India, we have the Korean program, we have Sweden, we have Turkey. We've got upgrades, 26,000 engines in the military are our power, and we have a great upgrade suite that came from the commercial world that now we can put into all of those engines as well. Business and general aviation, another growth platform, whether it be Passport, the Honda engine, or the advanced turboprop, which we've now named the Catalyst. That went to test for the first time since the last time we were together. And I could go on and on. We've got additive, hybrid electric, got Aeros, our accelerated integration of air and ground space for unmanned, JV, digital, Avio. I think I'll just open it up in a minute so you guys can ask some questions, but let me just do a quick wrap. What I'm proudest about of this business is that we put technology at the core of our success. We differentiate our products every day based on bringing to the customer the best value proposition. And the customers are recognizing that and they're rewarding us in the marketplace. To give you a perspective, in Tony's world, we ran the highest pressure, highest temperature jet engine in the history of aviation. We ran, in Bill's world, the record thrust on a G9X at 134,000 pounds of thrust in his world. And the longest commercial nonstop scheduled service in the history of the industry. And at the same time, we shipped a 33,000 CFM engine into service in Gene's world, just to give you an idea of just how big and broad this portfolio is and where we think it's going. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. Feel free. Yeah. How do you do these?
I'll just pick them out.
Okay.
Steve Thermal, Flight Global. Tony, we mentioned the adaptive engine and also the latest award with the air superiority, perhaps whatever comes after the F-35
Yep.
ATP. But it is, so as you look at that program going into the future, when you, what do you think about what the military wants to do between the sole source route that they eventually took on F-35 versus the original competitive strategy that they had, and also what they still have today with the F-100 and F-110? As you look ahead, do you have any signs or any indication of what how the military wants to approach that with whatever comes next?
Yeah. So the program, as David said, we have two contracts. The AETP contract that was $1 billion. We also just got the $437 million Tech Maturation Development Program. So we've been working very closely with the Propulsion Directorate in terms of how you get to a prototyping concept such that you reduce risk. And they have decided that they're going to carry two during that particular phase. They haven't made a decision in terms of whether or not they're going to carry two through production. And our job is to continue to mature the technology, stay ahead in the adaptive cycle technology world, and then at the point that it goes one way or the other, be able to compete and win. And so we're well positioned, and we'll see where it goes.
Game on.
Okay, on airline world, Emirates still hasn't announced which order to power the follow-on order for the A380. How is General Electric Engine Alliance in the race for that?
We're in active discussion with Emirates. I was actually in Dubai earlier this month to have discussions with them, and we're going to work closely with Emirates and see if there's an opportunity for us to power the next phase of aircraft. We think we have a great product. It has terrific reliability reputation. It has an advantage from a fuel efficiency perspective, and so we're excited about the opportunity.
And that's a tough, Bill, and you know, that environment, Emirates is a pretty tough environment, and that GP 7000 engine has proven that it can handle it.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
from their point of view, it's a low-risk alternative. If they pick the GP 7000, they have so much experience with that engine, airplane competition. So, I feel
Are
pretty
you
good about it.
continuing to offer an updated version?
I'm sorry?
Are you offering an updated version of this engine?
No, we're offering an existing asset.
John?
David,
John.
how are you, David?
I'm good.
On NMA, have you been able to reconcile the seeming disagreement between the size of the market for this airplane and how many engines you believe should be offered for this airplane versus how many Boeing and customers believe that? And within that market size, are you advocating for any kind of shift in the size of the airplane to either expand the market
Yeah.
to give you more opportunity?
You know, John, you can imagine, and I said this last year, so I don't want to be repetitive, but I'll repeat. Nothing excites a show like this more than the opportunity to power and build a new airplane and a new engine, right? That's what we all live for. That being said, the reality is that it's got to make economic sense for everybody. You know, I would say that we are proposing just like Boeing wants us to. You know, we put in a proposal a couple weeks ago for their request, not just us, but the other guys. We've committed that we'll do the engine with Safran as part of the CFM joint venture, even if it sneaks a little bit north of 50,000 pounds of thrust, which is the cutoff limit for the CFM JV. We would still consider it to be in the spirit of the JV, you know, 52,000 pounds of thrust versus 50,000 pounds of thrust, right? So we have agreed that we would go with CFM together, Philippe and I, to do the engine, and that's how we proposed it to Boeing. I would say we're still wrestling with what the size of the market is, and that's a big question, John, because you know, people feel great when you launch, but your shareholders don't feel great until it's successful, right? So at the end of the day, that program's got to turn into a program like GENX for us or like LEAP for us, so these big investments come home. And I would say we aren't completely reconciled right now, but we're not done all our homework. You know, we're taking a lot of input from the airlines as well. Boeing's been terrific to work with, and between us and Safran and Boeing, we're working really hard to triangulate on what the market is and what that means in terms of how many variants that they offer on the airplane, right? And then what does that mean in terms of how we size the engine, depending on what variant there is. So that's all in flux as we speak.
When are you expecting a response from Boeing on who they're actually going to pick?
Not until 19. I think they came out earlier in the show and said that Dennis did, and he said the decision would be sometime in 19. That's consistent with what we've heard. We will iterate the proposals with them, though. We're expecting to get some feedback on this first round, which would result, you know what I mean? So the process begins, John, you know? So we're kind of rolling through it.
Love it.
David.
Sorry.
Hi, Dominic Gates, Seattle Times. GEs have been very important in the industry, in the commercial industry, in financing, not only through GCAS financing customers, but also when you've got sole source on an engine, putting money into airplane programs to get sole source. With the new GE shrunken, are you going to have the financial wherewithal to continue to do that, to give that kind of support to the OEMs? And also, do you need sole source on the NMA?
Well, let me start with the first question, then we'll do the NMA question. I would say that the changes in GE, if anything, unlock more capability out of GE Aviation. I mean, the board is absolutely more committed to aviation as being a centerpiece for the company than it ever has been. The support that I get has been incredible. I don't feel any constraints at all relative to, you know, what's happened in the last year. In fact, I feel just the opposite, to be very honest with you. I would tell you that being said, you know, our sole source or dual source behavior is really dependent on what we think the size of the market is and whether we can make a business case close. It's really that simple. You know, that you know, the drama of these programs and the mystique of the programs has to boil down to standing in front of a board and showing them a business case that they're going to give you a green light to invest in. You know, and that's when the rubber hits the road. I mean, The people I talk to at the board are not anywhere near as emotional about this industry as we are, I might add. So I like that because it forces us to have a level of discipline relative to the business case that assures us that we're making the right investments. So I would say right now on NMA, we haven't made a decision on 1 versus 2. What I told you last year is we're not going to do 3 because we think that that's just a recipe for disaster. But you know, depending on how the thing turns out, we'll see where it goes. But I don't feel any constraints. I have to be honest with you.
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, Robert with the Journal. I just wanted to pick up a bit on the first thought, the new GE. I mean, obviously you are kind of even more important now to the company. Talk a bit more about, you said you're still unlocking. How does what you do now change? Do you have more firepower to do M&A? Do you have a mandate to grow even more aggressively?
Yeah.
If that's even possible?
Yeah, I don't think it's possible, but you know, our game plan, you know, if you look back, we've been really balanced on organic and inorganic growth within aviation. If you take, you know, we did Smiths, if you go all the way back. We then did Avio, which was a big deal in 2012. It was 3.8 billion euro or whatever. I don't have the exact number. And we've done a lot of M&A work. At the same time, we've done a ton of organic investment, as we talked about, to transition the entire commercial portfolio. And the leverage, the annuity of that organic investment is that all that technology gets leveraged into Tony's world now for military, right? So we get 2 bangs for our buck if those engineers can go over and apply their talents now to go win these military programs after we've invested in them in the commercial world. So I would say that for me, you know, it's business as usual. If I had a good opportunity, I'd make a call to John and we would go at it. I don't feel at all constrained. I really don't. I think relative to the role of GE Aviation, I quite frankly don't think it's any different than it was before. We don't feel like we're under a lot more pressure or anything else than we were before. We felt a lot of pressure that we had to perform before the new GE, and we feel the same level of pressure now to make sure that we return to the shareholders the right value for the investments they give us. And you know, we make some big investments in this industry. I mean, when we do an NMA engine, you know, you're talking a couple $2 billion we're asking the board for a loan until we can pay it back, right? So they have the right to be to really scrutinize the capital allocation decisions we make, and I don't see any difference in their you know, level of concern and support now than I did a year ago or 2 years ago.
But you did talk about unlocking. I'm just trying to figure out what that means.
The unlocking is really the value of the whole company. I mean, you know, when we IPO the healthcare business, we'll unlock value in that business. When we finish the deal with transportation with Laptop, we'll unlock value in that business at the end of the day. When John executes the plan with Baker Hughes GE that he laid out at the end of June, we'll unlock more opportunity and value as a result of that. You know what I mean? So there will be opportunity, definitely.
Amy Fowler, Air Force Magazine. I wanted to follow up on the B-52 re-engining. You mentioned that you have 2 engines that could work in that. Do you see the competition leaning more towards one engine over the other? Are you kind of waiting until the Air Force refines its requirements?
Yep. No, we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the Air Force. They do have a intense focus on life cycle cost. And so the CF34-10 plays well there, but they're also looking at the benefits of better fuel burn and the impact it has on the rest of the logistics trail in terms of fuel and tankers and other things. And so that's why we feel very good about the 2 offerings, because we kind of bookend both ends of the spectrum. We've got the gold standard in terms of time of wing with the CF34-10, and then we've got the best fuel burn engine in that thrust class with the Passport 20. And we're currently working with both Boeing and the Air Force as they work through the RFI and the RFP to figure out where the requirements really are going to come.
And let me give you I have to, this is one of my favorite stats that you told me that I wrote down. If they pick the -10, thinking of sustainability, right now that engine is performing on wing on the Embraer 190, 20,000 hours between time on wing, between overhauls. If you take a 20,000 hour time on wing engine and put it on a B-52, the airplane might go 50 years without having to remove an engine because of deterioration when you look at the cycles, right? To give you an idea what the sustainment cost could be by picking a commercially available motor that's demonstrated that level of maintainability and reliability, it's crazy, you know, when you look at it, you know what I mean? Which is one of the reasons it's such an attractive option. On the other hand, as Tony says, if you increase the fuel burn, better the fuel burn by double digits, then you have a whole different mission profile that you can look at as well, which is why we feel so good about either of those as alternatives. Sorry to jump in, but
Oh, no.
I love this stuff. It's one of my
Way in the back, I
favorites.
guess.
Yes,
Back. Okay.
excuse me, you mentioned innovation. What about innovating in production? It's a key issue for you in the company.
Sure,
So
yeah.
what are you going to invest in innovating in manufacturing?
Well, I've already have. I've built 8 new factories and modernized 10 more in the last 7 years. So we've spent, gosh, I'll get the numbers wrong. We're $10.5 billion in plant equipment over how many years is that number? I think it's the last 9 years.
8 or 9.
8 years. So I feel really good about our investment in modernizing our facilities, and in it now you start looking at even new technologies like CMCs. We created an entire supply chain for CMCs. We're making our own fiber, our own tape in Alabama, and we're making our own parts in Asheville, North Carolina. Nobody else in the world is using CMCs because there's not a supply chain in the world for CMCs. We own the supply chain for CMCs. We have a joint venture on the fiber. We make our own tape resin, and we make our parts out of it. So you look at additive. We have a full industrialized production facility in Auburn, Alabama, making fuel nozzles out of additives. So we feel really good about the future of manufacturing using additive. The advanced turboprop engine, 1/3 of the parts are made out of additive out of that engine. So I feel pretty good about the modernization program relative to our plants and equipment.
So the 787-10 with Gen X1B is EIS next year. There's a pending petition for an exemption for certification due to a software update that needs to be done. Do you have any expectation yet on when that certification is going to happen? And if the FAA doesn't grant the exemption, what's the plan B for getting the Gen X1B?
We've got a game plan that we're working closely with Boeing to get the software certified. It's more or less a minor issue that we simply have to get to the FAA. We've got great support from the FAA, and we don't anticipate that we'll have an issue.
A couple more questions. John, I'm sorry, I guess some guys in the back. Go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, Andrew Channel from the Journal as well. We've seen some in-flight incidents involving engines, and wondering sort of largely, are we, are engine makers generally sort of going too far, pushing the envelope with materials being used, and reaching or at sort of the limits of what new efficiencies and demands of improvements in power and sort of put on the engine?
Yeah, I would say no, and I would tell you I don't agree that we're having an industry-wide issue with reliability of in-flight engines. I would tell you we're not. I'm thrilled with the GNX relative to time on wing as well as its reliability. I'm thrilled with the G90. I'm very happy with LEAP. We've had a few issues with the shroud, but really, I mean, the issue we had with the shroud flaking was nothing other than the EGT margin went on a relative basis. EGT margin went down, and we had to replace them so that we could reestablish the clearances in the turbine. But it had no durability issue on actually the engine itself. So I would tell you that this industry, the one thing this industry does when it certifies is it really works hard to make sure that these engines are very, very safe. The durability of the engines are, really part of the test program. So I don't see us pushing the envelope beyond anything we can do, and I don't see it being that different. Now, I will say that if you take a look over the last 10 years, the amount of new propulsion on a relative basis is probably where it was back in the 60s. So if you just look at the number of new programs, you know what I mean? I mean, between us and Rolls-Royce and Pratt Whitney, there's a lot of new motors. You have to go way back in time to find brand new product, that much brand new product that's been introduced at the same time in the industry. So I think there is, you know, there's an inherent learning curve that occurs as a result of all this new product going in, but I don't affiliate that with pushing envelopes on technology at all, to be very honest with you.
Jim?
Tim Heath from Rogers. Oh, was it me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Two questions. You said just now that you saw no constraints resulting from the changes at GE. In fact, quite the opposite. That suggests to me that in the past you perhaps have been in some way propping up or helping out less performing parts of the company. Otherwise, what is it that would be just the opposite?
No, but no, I would say, no, I didn't mean it that way. I apologize.
I am
took it that way,
words here, but
yeah, no, I'm not going to let you.
Seems like
You may want to, but I ain't going to let you.
In what way does it actually?
No, I would tell you, whether it be under Jeff or whether it be under John, we, Aviation, have always gotten a fair shot. I mean, think about what we've done. I mean, my God, look, we just went through it, right? I literally walked into his office with a plan for 5 years that spent, you know, $7 billion to take the CF6 to the GNX, start the LEAP program so we could replace the CFM, put the Passport underneath the Global, do the Honda, take the advanced turboprop engine, and while I'm at it, do the G9X instead of the G90 just for grins, right? And literally, just think about that, you know what I mean? And then I turned around and showed the investments we'd have to make to do all of his stuff, right? Which is the T401, the 901, the T408, doing the B52 re-engineering. I mean, and then just for grins, we decided to start an additive business. So we bought 2 additive companies, and then we bought Aviation in 2012 just to throw that on the budget. I have not been constrained at all as long as I can create the right rationale for a good business case. This is a terrific market. GE loves aerospace as an investment. It's been up to me to make sure that I can show my board and my CEO the right returns, but I've never been happier with and never had a problem as long as I can show the right business cases.
The second question, you said that you would serve the NMA with CFM even if it goes outside the thrust class.
Yeah, by a scotch.
So what are the upper limits of that? I mean, can CFM now aspire to play in a slightly new niche?
No, I wouldn't say that. No. What happens, this happens often with CFM. I'll give you an example. When CF34-10 was built, first right of refusal for the CF34-10 was CFM because it was just a little bit below, and I'm talking just barely below, where the limits were on the low side. At the time, Safran decided that they didn't see that market being big enough that they wanted to participate. We were fine. We did the CF34-10. So we're very respectful of the spirit of the joint venture and not the letter of the joint venture. And that's why it's so successful. It's 44 years we've been together. It's the most successful JV in all of aerospace. Like I said, 33,000 CFM engines have been shipped this year. And the reason is because there's so much confidence and trust in each other's partnerships that it's the spirit of that partnership that's more important than the letter of it. So I would say we're not looking for a letter, we're looking for a spirit here relative to enemy.
Guy and John, that'd be it. How about 3 more? Guy, John. Okay, here we go.
Sorry, just a quick check.
Hi, Guy.
Hi. What's the situation with the G9X at the moment, just in terms of its, where it is in the program? And is there any sort of movement on the 777X order bookings that you guys?
So on the 9X itself, as David mentioned, we flew for the first time, put it up in the air in March. We did 102 hours up in the air. We had a great flight test bed program. It validated what we had planned for from a fuel efficiency perspective. We got some great insights in terms of where we need to finish out from a certification perspective. Probably half of the certification reports are now submitted by. So we're on track in terms of what we had expected. From an engine performance perspective, we're on track from a certification testing and certification submission. And frankly, we feel very good about how it's performing. I would say we feel equally good about the feedback that we're getting from Boeing. We do this in a very integrated way, and so with Eric Lindblad and his team, we're in lockstep, and they were on the plane out from Victorville as we were flying around, and so terrific feedback there. In terms of the order book, as you're aware, we had a big burst in the beginning, and it naturally slows down a little bit. I think you'd have to go to Boeing to talk about what they expect from orders, but we'll see orders coming through. We're at the tail end of the bridge from a 300ER perspective, and Kevin and the team have done a really nice job of essentially fighting to get to the number that represented the bridge guy. And so I think you'll naturally see that flow over. So we're not concerned from an order perspective at all.
Victoria here.
For military engines, the F110 and the 414 remain in production today. Can you see an end to those programs?
Yeah, so the F414, 404 family is probably one of the most decorated engine families in the world. I mean, we have integrated that engine family in 19 different airplanes, and we see it continuing well into the next decade. The 404 is on both the TX offerings for Boeing and Lockheed. We see Super Hornets going out now into the middle of the next decade. So the engine continues. That engine family continues to be very productive and successful in the market.
110.
About the 110.
110, yeah. We're still very vibrant on the 110. It actually, production ramps up here in the next few years as we start to power international opportunities. So we see that continuing to out into the next decade.
International modernization has actually given the F-110 a new life.
Yeah,
it really has.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, the 110 is out of production this year, but it's coming back strong with all the international opportunities.
How about two more? John and Dominic, is that all right? And the team will be around, so.
John.
Dave, at the risk of giving you a chance to dunk on your competition for a moment, the balance of orders between the 787 and the 330neo heavily tilted in favor of the 787 recently, but within that order set, the GE NX has been the selected engine. From your perspective, how much has GE, if at all, been able to benefit not just from an airframe perspective, but essentially, have you gotten feedback from from the customer base about questions over the reliability of Trent 1000, 7000 engines as a result, driving buying behavior way more than just airframes?
I would tell you that first of all, we're happy with where the GNX is, and we don't wish ill will on any engine manufacturer because we've been there. We were there with the original G90. There's nothing worse than when your engine's not working. So, not that that's the case, but I would tell you that the 787 operators that are powered by GE are really, really happy. I would tell you that the lease companies that own GE NX powered 787s in their portfolios are very happy in terms of potential placements going forward. I can't speak to the other side. I can speak to the satisfaction of our customers flying the 787 with the GNX, and we're very proud of that. I mean, and Bill, what?
So, look, we feel terrific about how the asset is performing. From a utilization perspective, we're 7% more utilized than the Rolls product is. We get about $9 million more revenue per plane per year than the other guy, tied to that utilization that I talked about. From a residual value perspective, our asset is $1.3 million noted by Air Finance, $1.3 million more residual value than the other guy, right? We got about a 65% win rate right now, and 2018 we've been at about a 90% win rate. So we feel very good about how customers feel about us, the feedback that we're getting, and frankly, our focus is not on taking advantage of their situation. Our focus is on how do we take those advantages I just described and make them more significant for our customers. And we're particularly proud to see UBS and others start to focus in on this utilization game, because I think the thing that surprised us in this decade of portfolio renewal that David talked about, we'd always focused on develop the best fuel efficiency. Let's make sure, emissions, noise, all the things that you traditionally design around. What the first couple of years of LEAP, and then now looking back at NX, has been a big focus by the industry on, are you utilizing the asset, right? And for the airline to be able to get more flights per day in is a huge impact, right? A 1% improvement in revenue is the equivalent to a 5% reduction in fuel burn. A 1% improvement in revenue is the equivalent of 5% reduction in fuel burn. That's massive, right? It's the equivalent of a 25% reduction in maintenance costs, right? So I think our design practices are now focused on how can we be fuel efficient and drive better utilization, right? It's not an or anymore, it's an and I think that has been one of the big benefits of the last decade of portfolio renewal.
Okay, I promise you just two more. I got Dominic, and then Perry, you have to do this next year. Dominic, and then they're a tough bunch, and then Pete, and then Tim. Okay, here we go.
Follow up on the GE9X and the 777X program. You said you're confident there will be more orders later, but what about the ramp up? You also said that you're at the tail end of the bridge of the current 777.
Yep.
But at one time the expectation was that 777X will ramp up to 100 a year, just like the 300 ER was. Doesn't seem to be the expectation anymore. There aren't enough orders. It looks like it's going to be slow ramp up, and slow ramp up for you guys building that engine. Any concerns about that?
I would say we're not concerned about that. I think the Boeing would need to comment on the ramp rate, not us. But from our focus, one, we're happy with the asset. Two, if there's a little bit more time, it gives us the opportunity to get cost out of the engine faster, right? So it's design the best engine and then make sure you've got the best efficiency opportunities as the supply chain ramps up. We're using that time to our advantage. We're taking a lot of the learnings from the LEAP ramp, which is the biggest ramp in the history of aviation, and we're trying to pull those over into getting the 9X on track. We're utilizing our dual source strategy from a LEAP perspective and the learnings that came from that as we go strengthen our position to get ready to ramp the 9X up, and we're working very closely with Boeing on how do we both capitalize on those learnings.
You must have a production rate in the plan.
We do.
And is it? It's not 100 a year, obviously, 100 planes a year.
No, but I think it's early to declare that there's a problem in the 2021 timeframe associated with that. I think, we feel pretty good about where we are.
No, I mean, look, what other airplane that's being offered today can replace the 777-300ER? Nothing. So it's just a matter of when, not if. And as long as the 777-300ER is flying, I'm a happy guy, thanks to Gene here, because of the services we're offering. Okay? So we are really happy with the bridge, the 777-300ER, its longevity, and the next generation, which is the 9X. I mean, that is, for me, that's game, set, match.
One last comment from the incredible Tim Heafer.
Do you believe that the NMA, the business case of the NMA, could be successful without damaging the business case for LEAP? In other words, could you imagine a situation where it makes sense on paper, but it would be unattractive to you because it would erode part of the original business case for LEAP?
No, I don't. I really don't. If I look, and I had to think about it just because of the latest machinations of what the NMA looks like, but I really don't. I really don't see it. I think what it's targeting right now is independent of our LEAP decisions.
You mean it's going up in size? Is that why?
I'm not. No. That's twice you've done.
Yeah, he always pretends like he doesn't understand.
We look at them independently.
Right.
I think we've worn them all out, but
All right, guys. Thanks.